record. So now, are you hearing anything that you're?
Check 1, 2. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit, but it's not that bad.
All right.
I mean, it's not worth.
I don't know
what
would cause that, but let's see. So over here, though, we did have mute now.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
All right.
Check 1,
let's
2.
just
Check
go
1,
ahead
2.
and queue up your. Go ahead and start it, and we'll.
You live?
Yep. Well, we're gonna. I just hit the button. We're live.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Kris and Dan on Culturally Damaged. It is Thursday at 3:33 p.m. It's about 95 degrees outside. It's hot. But we have a new look here on the show. I don't know if you're watching, but if you notice on Facebook, Dan's put us a neat little thing together that we have where we look a little differently. We sound the same. We still sound stupid, but we look pretty sleek now. How'd you do it, Dan?
Well, we've been talking about this for a few weeks now. I think I've only lost another pound in the last couple weeks, but I've been pretty aggressive with the weight loss. So a lot of it's just been they call the intermittent fasting. So I just don't eat that much. When the short part of it is when people ask me how'd you do it, I say, well, I stopped eating as much.
I was talking about the new look on our screen, man.
I don't know. That you just download software, pay for it.
Only if it were that easy to do. With our bodies, right?
Yes.
But no, I was going to ask you eventually how you were doing on that too. So it's like half of you's not here. I lost half of you since we started the show.
Well, I don't know about since the show, but since
we started the actual show, not today's show.
A third of the weight or something like that. Maybe?
Sheesh. Yep,
so
keep it going, man.
There's our little video. So I'm going to let's see if we can actually share this and. Figure this thing out here. So go ahead and continue, and we'll keep going here.
Well, there I was, one-on-one with the biggest grizzly bear you've ever seen in North America. Now, actually, today we're going to talk about a couple of things. I don't want to waste our time talking too much junk. We've got a lot of things to cover. A lot's going on locally. If you're a sports fan, the Tampa Bay Rays unveiled the rendering of a proposed new stadium. Everybody has their opinions on it. It seems to me they're mostly negative around here about just about everything. But the stadium, I think, is beautiful depending on, the things, or at least considering the things that you had to remember. They couldn't do a retractable dome, so they had to kind of do the translucent type of dome and a permanent fixture over the seats behind home plate. But for what I think they had to do, they kept it at a decent price. Most people would argue $893 million is not a decent price for a ballpark, but most of these parks and stadiums are well over $1 billion these days, especially ones with so much glass and all the materials that they have to build. So the issue now is obviously how are we going to pay for this? The team has said, or the organization has said, that they would put in $150 million. They've now said that they're open to paying a little bit more than $150 million. Maybe near half of the stadium costs could be paid by the organization. What? And so now where's the rest of it going to come? And are they even going to get up to $400 million to pay for this palace of a stadium in Ybor City?
Well, to begin with, 400. I mean, half is, I think the stadium is going to cost $809 million for the stadium itself, and then another almost $100 million in infrastructure that's going to have to be done to the Ybor area, channel side. So it pushes the cost of this up to pretty close to $900 million. And if any construction project has ever stayed on budget ever, that would be the first. So I wouldn't be surprised if the end result of this project is closer to $950 or $1 billion. I mean, it seems crazy, but that's how things go.
Does it though? I mean, let's look at the prices that most of these stadiums are costing around the league. They are upward to $1 billion in most of these. Some of them way over. Now a lot of them are football stadiums, but this is a first-class baseball park that we're talking about. They didn't
like the Trop.
Well, no, not at all. Not at all. The first thing they're going to have to do in Ybor City is they're going to have to shoo all the chickens out of there. There are chickens everywhere in Ybor City. They got to shoo all the chickens out. We're going to have to hire some chicken shooers to come out and shoo them all out.
Well, if they are hens, our friend Barbie Frangos might be interested since she's raising chickens for eggs.
Well, maybe we can have them transported over to her. And we can sell. How can we use this?
The roosters are the
profit.
problem,
We could use the chickens for profit. We can start selling egg salad at the stadium, and we can make it run a profit. Maybe it'll pay for the stadium.
Listen, the stadium is supposed to be multi-use, so and actually they talked about using the kitchens to maybe as like a food pantry or some other things like where they can actually use the kitchen during non-games or whatever to provide food to the homeless and things like that. So. We have a little section, bullpen, we turn into a little...
there has never been a stadium promotion that has ever said that we're just going to use this for this sport. Every time a stadium is built, it's sold on, we're going to use this thing 365 days a year. We're going to have charity wiffle ball tournaments. We're going to feed the homeless in the concession stands. And you know how much these stadiums get used? As soon as the team takes over the stadium... the city is told to stay the hell out, and it's going to be used on baseball games only. I just don't buy it that the stadium's going to be used for concerts and such. I hope so, but I think it's just a selling point to get the public on board to think that we're going to have this state-of-the-art landmark building that's going to be a glorified rec center in the middle of downtown in Ybor City. But do you really believe that that's going to happen?
I am naive, apparently, but I do believe that at least from a concert and perspective and things like that they'll have different events and do things like that. You know, it all depends. If they make a deal like they did with, or if it should be owned. I think the understanding is that this would be owned by the Tampa Bay Sporting Authority or something like that. So if it is, they just better not make the same deal that they made with the Glazers and the Bucks. And I think. You know, we talk about stadium stuff. A lot of people are upset about that. And I can say I've been upset about this Glazers deal with the Bucks that they've had going on forever because the problem with that deal is that the Bucks get all revenue. All revenue. It doesn't matter whether it was from a Bucks game or a mutiny. The mutiny used to play in Raymond James.
Then they had a mutiny.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the reasons why the mutiny folded. And it was because revenue. I mean, how do you parking, all the revenue from parking, concessions, all that stuff.
Went right to the Glazer's pocket.
Yeah.
And the Glazier at the time, that was old man Glazier, at the time was worth $4 to $5 billion. And that's back in 1995, 96. So we're talking about, with inflation, that's a lot more today, but that's a lot of money. So we have taxpayers footing the bill for a billionaire who's getting all the revenue for the money, for all the returns that they get on the stadium. So now we're talking about this issue that has come up all over the country, probably most recently in Miami, where the taxpayers were stuck with that stadium that's really bringing in next to nothing, and they're not getting anything out of it. You see that place is completely empty all the time. So all the naysayers in this area are pointing to Miami to say, no, we're not doing that. We're not paying for the stadium. We're not paying half of it. If the owners want to build a stadium in Tampa, they should pay for it since they're the ones getting the revenue. And we should build schools instead of stadiums. What do you think of that?
Well, I think we obviously do need schools, but those come out of a different budget than what we're talking about here. So as much as we like to try to pass things for that. But I think, we talked about this. And, I think it all depends on your return on investment. And to me, I try to take a pragmatic approach to most stuff. So I look at this as if the Hillsborough County or City of Tampa, whatever, if they invest 50 cents and get a return of $1 for every, to the community, not the raise, but to the community, then it's a worthwhile investment for the community to do that.
But it's difficult to quantify how much you get back because you really can't say exactly how much money is being imported from Lakeland, from Orlando, from Pasco County into Tampa, into the economy in the city of Tampa. So it really is hard to say. But let me make a point, though. If it were a good investment, wouldn't capitalism dictate that private investors would invest in the stadium and cover that $400 or $500 million. If it was going to get a good return on its investment, people out there that have money and they would invest in this. So is that a good indication that this is not a good investment?
No, and only because I say, just like a class action lawsuit, the benefit of this stadium is potentially going to be spread among thousands of business owners, residents. There'll be things that are going to be built because of this stadium. If this new stadium does get built in Ybor, eventually transportation is going to have to. It will spur transportation, and if that is what finally spurs the growth of rail or some other sort of transportation in our area, getting from a ballpark, like we talk about connecting Tampa and Orlando a lot. Well, having another ballpark that has games, 82, 81 games a year, they want to attract a crowd from Orlando, and people are not going to drive to Orlando on a daily basis to go see a game. They might take a train.
Not. No, absolutely not. I think the same argument was probably made when the Trop was built, when we had the Sun Dome or whatever. It was going, well, yes, it was.
Well, I'm just saying that
it's going to spur development in the area. It's an anchor. It's going to spur. Don't tell me that they didn't say that when they built the Trop, that, hey, this is going to spur development all through the area. And it didn't. But
when they built the Trop, they just kind of did it their own. They kind of went on their own little path. That stadium, and we talk about, and I joke about the Trop, the new stadium being up to date and all that kind of stuff. The Trop apparently was obsolete when the Trop was built. So the day that it opened, it was already obsolete as far as
maybe the day it opened, but not the day it was built. The day it opened was probably 10 to 12 years after it was built, wasn't it not?
Well, but that's part of the point, though, is that St. Pete built that stadium in a location. They picked that location because the land was cheap and because they wanted to redevelop an area of St. Pete, not because that was the best placement for a stadium.
But it is very close to downtown, very similar to what we're doing in Tampa. There's a place with cheap land. There's just warehouses sitting there on the side of a port where there's cargo ships coming in.
But it's obviously not the center of population.
It is. Well, it is now. What they're trying to do, I think, is
the St. Pete, though.
The St. Pete, the St. Pete was absolutely a terrible idea in terms of geographic population and location. That was definitely a terrible idea. There's no doubt about that. But I think the argument was always there that this is going to be a multi-use facility that we're going to use 365 days a year. And I will give them credit with the Trop. They host graduations there. They had a Final Four there. They used to play hockey there.
I saw basketball games there.
You saw basketball games there. They were using the Trop as much as they could, but St. Petersburg didn't have another venue like Amalie Arena to be able to do things like that. So, they were kind of forced to do that. But I will give them credit for that. But I think the same sales pitch is made every time we build a stadium, though, that we're going to use it this way, we're going to use it this way. The public's going to be able to just basically walk in. They're going to have functions there. I hope that's the case. I hope it is. I hope that we have a lot more access to that place than what I think we will.
Well, and I'll say, too, that if you look at some of the diagrams, and we can, with our new little software here, we can actually throw some of those out there.
Ooh, let's do that.
And,
I love technology.
We can try and see what happens here. But, so, when we look at the stadium, there's a lot more access to that stadium than there was with, let's see, so what do we have here? The full exterior, the home plate interior. Where's that exterior? Where's the street level here? So, we put this little street level. Okay. I know we're blocking us, but we can see if you're seeing the video or the picture on here, you can see how different this stadium looks than the Trop from the outside. Now, granted, are all these people going to be around there? I don't know, but there is a lot of outdoor exterior space where people actually can come and mingle. And I was in Baltimore. I forget what's that stadium's name.
Camden Yards, yeah. Beautiful stadium, same designer.
Yeah, and they have a brick roads and all that kind of stuff where you can walk around the stadium. And
it's very festive outside of the stadium.
Even when there's no game going on, it's still kind of cool to be there.
Nationals Park in D.C., the same kind of way. They actually have where you get off the metro to go to the stadium. You walk down a road that has a bunch of things around it. There's big festivals going on as you're getting, because most people get there from the train at Navy Yard. So when they get off, they walk through there. And this is supposed to be sort of a corridor to Ybor City. If anybody's not familiar with Ybor City, it is a kind of a Cuban settlement from way back. Is the reason why we call Tampa the Cigar City. It is a big center for cigar manufacturing and is now turned into a big nightlife area where people go to party and have a big time. So connecting downtown to Ybor City with this stadium really is a great link, and I think what you just put up there kind of shows how it follows that old architecture from Ybor City with the bricks and everything, and goes along with that.
And then here's just another view that, it shows like the glass. And this is obviously, or one of the reasons why this stadium is so expensive.
Yes. So 30-foot, 50-foot glass, yeah.
If we wanted to have another dome built that looks like the Trop, we could have probably gotten a stadium for what? $700 million, right?
Yeah.
A little cheaper.
Let me dig into my couch. I'll get that, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about, we could have had a cheaper stadium, but, they said the roof is like $200 and something million.
Yeah, any roof is going to be
at least $100 million.
A third of your cost is going to be in your roof.
Yeah,
and when a lot of people are saying this is a glorified Tropicana field, I call BS on that.
Yes,
this is beautiful, and the biggest thing about it, I think, is that it lets in natural light. Mm-hmm. You can open these windows that you see on the screen right now.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if the back ones do. The back ones open?
Yes, I believe I believe they do. Kind of like Minute Maid Field, where they can open
only
them
the home plate side open. But I don't know.
Maybe that's the case. But my understanding was that the windows open so that on nice days, when we get into the fall, if we're lucky enough to get nice days, maybe in April, maybe in October, if we ever did play in October, we could get some wind coming in. It would be nice to get a little sea breeze. But the stadium's actually facing, this window here is facing Ybor City. So when you look out of the window from behind home plate, my understanding is that's going to be facing Ybor. And the home plate, there's also another glass window behind home plate where you'll be able to see the Tampa Bay skyline.
So this is actually the window, and you see this is the window from the home plate side.
And that's very unique.
From the outside.
You've never seen anything like that, or we've never seen anything like that, where you can look in and see the field from behind home plate, because those are very valuable seats to have right there. But for the way that they did it, to open it up, it's going to bring in light. You have to hope that's not going to affect the pitcher, but maybe it could at a certain time of day.
But I'll tell you, I mean, like, when you look at this, I mean, I wasn't, originally a lot of the discussion leading up to this was that the stadium was, we want it to look like it's a part of the Ybor, and we want to make it fit into the neighborhood. So obviously that was a lot of talk. I'm not sure the Rays said that. Well, I
think the exterior does. When you get down to ground level, like at the vision that you just showed, down to festive level. But they also wanted to make it, I think, sort of an artistic piece of work that's in the middle of town that when you drive by, you see it, it looks beautiful. And I think that's what they did.
The opposite of the Trop.
The opposite of the Trop,
Trop, I hate to say it, but like the Trop looks like a much stubbier version of the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
The Trop needs a V8. Yeah. And it's drunk. It needs to get home.
Yeah. I mean, it actually looks like the Trop is sinking into the ground the way they built that dome. The way it's
sideways. It was unique. At the time, I think it was probably considered an architectural feat. But this is has the same kind of feel a little bit because it's a partial dome and partial permanent fixture. But it's beautifully designed and it has a lot of unique.
And if they can do something like this, I mean, that's beautiful. To drive by and see that, it even makes any other stadium that we have. I mean, Raymond James is nice.
But Raymond James is sort of industrial for the most part, though. It's not architecturally.
No, but they have a lot of glass, beautiful. And those kind of things do make it. And glass, it does make things nice. Like,
but you got to drive down Del Mabry to see it. It's hard to see it from 275. You can see it, but it's a bit off into the distance.
So, and then of course, as we talked about, a lot of people do not believe. So this is a kind of a.
I really like that. I think that's cool. It looks like a stingray.
I think it looks a little weird from this view, but I'm okay with having light, and that's the other thing too. And we've kind of talked about the talked about the fact that I like it, like the night games are the real is where you have that ambiance,
right? Where you don't have the dim feel of the Trop at night, where the lights are just.
Well, you can't tell. Like, you can't tell whether you're during the day or it's the same inside the Trop.
Yeah,
no matter what.
The roof is not as translucent as it seems to be.
And so hopefully with all the windows and I don't know how much more translucent the roof is going to be than it is. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be more.
I think that's a big thing. Yeah. And I think they didn't even know exactly what material they were going to use when they had the presentation the other day. But I think they're trying to find something that's almost transparent and not just translucent. But you have to have something that's also going to be able to withhold the strength of a Category 5 hurricane that could come through here.
So, but it should give us that night view, because when you watch games on ESPN or something, or
if we ever get on there,
or something. Well, but when we're just watching any game, doesn't matter. But if it's at night in one of the other stadiums that's open, like you can just see the feel, and there's a whole nother feel when you have that outside, and the sounds don't echo and.
Right. You don't feel like you're in a convention center.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that that's what this does. I mean, they know that they had to do it outside, or they had to do it inside. But they did what they could for the price that they had to keep it. Because if they would have done a retractable dome, which a lot of people are complaining that they didn't, that would have cost $300,000 more dollars, or $300 million more dollars to add a retractable dome, and that's just that's not us. We can't do that. We can't live a rock and roll lifestyle on a country western budget.
Well, you know what?
We have a country western budget.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would like. I mean, I complain a little bit about the architecture of this, but what's the architecture of a building with a giant retractable roof? It doesn't look like anything like that.
No, it's
right?
ugly. I mean, let's look at the most recent one built was the one in Miami. And so it's a stadium, and then they just roll the top of it over. And you have to think, how much does it cost each time they close that thing? And how often do they open it? A lot of these retractable places, especially in these hot states, they don't even really open them that often. It's just the options there. You could talk about something that they did in Philadelphia where it's the spiral opening at the very top. But, you're talking about billions in dollars. We don't have a team that's... I'm sorry, our team's not really worthy of spending over $1 billion on a stadium.
Well, we're pretty close to that. So
yeah,
but it's just
look
a matter
at what the dome in Atlanta costs. I mean, look at what some of these other stadiums are costing.
Yeah, and we don't need. I mean, look, the reality is, in baseball, and we've talked about this in the office. Whether fan support for baseball is going to be there in the future or not, I don't know. But no matter what, in all sports, going to the actual game, the numbers have declined, and they're continuing to decline for all sports as far as live viewership, where they're all facing different issues, having to encourage people to come out for new reasons than they ever had to. So, a 30,000 seat stadium, 28,000 whatever, with a couple thousand in standing room is perfect, because owners don't need 50,000 people to show up to a game. Yeah, that's nice little chump, that's nice pocket change for them.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen very often anyway.
Yeah.
Right, and it looks terrible when you cover seats,
yeah.
Which we do now, which they do in Jacksonville, and it's just it's kind of embarrassing when your team covers seats.
And who wants to be that far away when there's all these other open seats? So, say we had 10,000 extra seats, and you're sitting in the upper deck, and there's all sorts of empty seats at the bottom. I mean, who wants that?
I believe the league requires about 27,000 minimum seats in an MLB stadium. And so I think this is going to be the smallest stadium in the MLB if it's built. But I have no problem with that. It's better to play in a full stadium than a big stadium that's half empty any day of the week. That's a lesson we learn in politics. As we learn in other things, you want to have a small room with that looks full other than a big room that with the same amount of people.
And those playoff tickets, when the Rays get there, are going to become a little bit more valuable. So
yeah, they're going to be hot. If you think about it, the Trop is not going to be much bigger than Amalie Arena. You're talking about 20,000, close to 20,000 people in Amalie Arena.
Not the Trop, yeah.
And the new Trop, or the new whatever you want to call it, the new Rays Stadium is going to be just about a third bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you still have a 60,000 seat stadium down the road.
Wrigley Field, before they added bleachers and all that kind of stuff, it was around 32,000. Yeah. I mean, it's not, and it's awesome. I mean, look, I'm not saying that we're building the next Wrigley Field here.
Who knows?
But it is nice to be close.
It's intimate. And that's what baseball has to come to nowadays, because we're not getting the volume of people that are coming out to the game. So we have to enhance that experience for the games. So now we're making it a lot more.
What do we got there?
What happens during the playoffs? Playoffs?
Here, we have somebody.
Playoffs. Evan Freeman, who is running for judge.
There we go. Now we can see.
Has a good question for us.
Who's actually going to be one of our guests in
2 weeks from today, I believe. Evan Freeman is going to be our guest. He is running for judge in the Sixth Circuit, and he wants to know what's going to happen during the playoffs. Well, we just talked about it. First off, we have to make the playoffs, Evan. That's going to be our first problem.
Here, we'll put it over Kris.
No, don't put it over that beautiful face. There we go. Hey, you got a little Marco. That's okay, though. I think during the playoffs, you have a hot ticket. And you better get one, because if you don't be one of those 30,000 people, then you're going to be watching it at home. But we did get a new TV contract recently, which is worth $50 million a year or something like that. I mean, it's pretty sizable that the team is getting, which is another reason why I think that the team should be putting more money into the stadium based on that TV contract. But I know that they have other expenses. There's no doubt about that. But playoffs, I mean, that's going to be fun. I mean, if you're fighting for those tickets, it's going to be a packed house.
Well, I'll tell you what, New York, the Yankees, it doesn't matter how many seats they put in their stadium. They're never going to have enough tickets for everybody who wants to come to a playoff game.
And those tickets are expensive,
yeah.
Especially for playoff games. Oh, man. Yankees tickets anywhere on the lower level, I mean, you're talking in the thousands.
Yeah, so, that problem is always going to exist. And somebody did say that, look, if, like, the Lightning are in the playoffs, and the Rays, because they will overlap, that it will cause quite a little parking issue over there. But
well, let's talk
that's
about
always true.
Let's talk about parking for a second. Where in the hell are people going to park over there? I don't see it. I didn't see any plans for a parking garage over there. The city's already they're going to be to the brim. They're going to be cut to the bone as far as they can on paying for the stadium by itself. Is somebody going to invest in buying property and putting parking and trying to make money on it? How's this going to work? You talked about transit. We know in Tallahassee right now that some transportation committee is talking about putting not rail. It's a system that's on tires, but it's in what looks like a rail track, putting from Dade City all the way down to Tampa. Not Tampa, but St. Pete. But that's not going to make any difference on this unless it goes right up to the stadium, and we don't know how big it's going to be if it ever does happen. So how are we going to get people transported to the stadium if we get a stadium?
Well, most of it's going to be driving, just like it is today, because we don't believe in mass transit in Florida, at least in Tampa Bay area.
That's another show altogether.
Yeah. And which, I'm not necessarily opposed to a lot of the reasons why, but there's some benefits to it as well. Actually, as we talk about like mass transit and anyway, Deck, were you asking me anyway?
How are we going to get people to the game? Where are they going to park? I mean, I just drove by
Uber
there.
and Lyft. They said they were going to have a little place for people to take Uber and Lyft.
Yeah, you and I both heard that and shook our heads like, wow, I hope that's not our plan. Nothing wrong with Uber and Lyft, but we all know that during those times where it's busy that, I was just recently at the Weezer concert, and we were going to try to get an Uber or a Lyft from the concert where there was about 30,000 people, and it's just impossible. It doesn't matter how many little pull-ups you have. You're fighting people over cars when they pull in. It's just a mess. So let's just go ahead.
So that's not going to work?
Let's go ahead and strike that, man. That's not going to work. And then the little trolley that you have that goes down through there on the cable cars, that's going to make up about 0.5%.
Well, actually, I think that not the trolley itself. Well, and so here's the reality. They're going to have to park outside of this district, and hopefully we'll have some way, whether it's trolley systems or other sort of, if it's short buses or other ways to get people in and out of there or something. So
I can't not make a short bus joke.
But there's also, like we talk about the ferry, and there's some other things, at least from St. Pete. From St. Pete, I think that ferry is going to be a very attractive
It's not going to get you anywhere near Ybor.
It goes right up in the little channel side, and there's already tracks. Then you just take the little trolley.
All right, so that water place that you're talking about, do you have a map that you could pull up?
No, we're not ready for that one.
That little water area that comes up is basically for cargo ships. That is for ships that are coming in to the port of Tampa.
I'm not saying they're not going to have to make some adjustments.
I'm not sure that could even work, but hey, I hope it can. A similar system is at the Navy Yard in D.C., where Nationalist Park is. They actually have a boat that goes from Alexandria, and you get on Alexandria, so you don't have to drive all the way down and across the bridge, across the Potomac. You get on the bridge, and it takes you right up to the stadium, across the Potomac. And that's pretty neat. And that would be nice if they could do that. But what you're talking about, you got to get through all the cargo ships, and hopefully you don't get ran over by one. and then you get to the end of it, and then you got to go under the expressway. So, I mean, maybe they can build some things that's going to transport people from the water to the stadium. But this infrastructure stuff, man, is a big part of this stadium. It's not going to be as easy as just dropping this spaceship down in the middle of town and hoping that people come out to it. Because if you come once and you have to walk 3 miles, you're not going to come back.
Well, and I think that's the important thing. And maybe that's, a big reason why it hasn't worked out in St. Pete as well. And, because they put a stadium in and they didn't have a plan, or they didn't have the votes or whatever to deal with the infrastructure that you would need to do that. And so I think one would hope that in all of these discussions that, parking and transportation is obviously, I'm sure it's being discussed and worked out. And
I hope so. It just wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't part of what they discussed. I was very impressive with what they came up with. The location, a lot of people, I'd say probably a good 65% of people are bitching and moaning about the location. It's not the right location. They're still going to fail. It seems like pleasing people here is very, very difficult. I'm not sure why. But I think for what they had to work with, obviously you want a park that was close to water, like the one that was designed in St. Pete years ago that the city shot down. You want to utilize that water, but it was next to impossible to do. Water, Channelside would have been a great location for the stadium. However, it just wasn't doable. They've got other things planned over there. It just wasn't a possible reality. It would have been very difficult to get to that stadium as it is Amley. And if you had 2 games going at the same time, imagine what that would have been like. A lot of people wanted to put it over where Raymond James is and have a kind of a sports complex over there.
Kick the Yankees out. That was my idea.
Kick the Yankees out. Build a stadium on top of George Steinbrenner's grave over there. But
we could put up a little statue for him.
Put up a little statue in the outfield.
A little one.
In the Rays Stadium. Yeah. No. I mean, it's nice having the Yankees here. But having a stadium across the street from another baseball stadium, across the street from a football stadium, I don't know. There's a lot of cities that do that. I mean, Philadelphia has done that. But we wanted to have something that looked nice, something that we could be proud of.
I was going to make a joke about Philly, but I'll be nice to him.
I don't know why.
Fine. They ran out of garbage dumps to put stadiums on.
I just think it would have been boring over there. I mean, plus, you got to drive by 9 strip clubs to get there. There's no character.
10. They just built a new one last week.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Well, Redner's got 10 now, but there's no character over there. I mean, there's character, but there's no.
There are characters.
There are definitely characters, but there's no character in that area. It's just a flat strip mall area with strip clubs and stadiums. It's fun. I like the Bucks there. There's a lot of room to tailgate and stuff. But
as I heard before, the Rays have smarter people working on this than me, and definitely smarter than you working on this project. So I'm sure they'll figure this one out. So
I don't know. That's reaching.
Not very far. No. But no, it's I really do hope and I've talked about it before. I think that a stadium adds to our community, not just or a baseball team, not necessarily the stadium, but having a major league. There's only 32 teams, 20 something cities who have teams, and right now the Tampa Bay region is one of those regions that has a Major League Baseball franchise.
What do you think about the people, and what is your answer to the assertion that this area cannot support a baseball team, a Major League Baseball team?
Well, we're currently supporting a Major League Baseball team. I mean, the owners are not. I mean, they're not leaving. They're not going bankrupt. They're making money, so they're putting
worst attendance in the league.
Yes, but the team is making money, and they're actually performing probably better than the average. They're probably better if we went back like the last 10 years since Sternberg's been the owner. They're probably in the top half as far as win percentage.
No, absolutely. I'm not talking about the performance of the team. I'm talking about the performance of the fans.
Yeah.
Are they supporting this team now to a level that they should be? No.
From a TV perspective, yes, we are. Because the ratings for the Rays are through the roof as far as watching the Rays on TV. Do people go to a stadium? No. But there may be a lot of reasons why those people aren't going to that stadium. So
okay, but going back to the question at hand, though, is what do you say to the people who say that in general, no matter where you put this team, this region cannot support a baseball team?
I mean, they're not. There's no facts or studies that would back that up. I mean, I think Major League Baseball. If Major League Baseball didn't think that that Tampa Bay market was a viable market, this team will not stay in Tampa.
Sure, of course they would.
I mean,
there's no
Major League
loyalty.
Baseball,
there's no loyalty to Tampa Bay.
No, I mean our fans and the ownership has some loyalty, but Major League Baseball itself, they have no loyalty.
No, there's no
the
loyalty
owner
in
of
baseball.
if the
no
owner
crying in baseball.
If the ownership of the Yankees, the Red Sox, the White Sox, the Cubs all felt that Tampa Bay was not a viable market and that they would make more money elsewhere, this team would be elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the New York Yankees weren't making money, the New York Yankees would move. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
But those teams
it's
pay us
money.
So I mean, as far as revenue sharing. So I mean, they're not going to let us stay where they're losing money on us.
Yeah.
So if there was a better market, they would go. And so
we are the 11th biggest market out there right now in terms of the Nielsen ratings, and that's the one many people go by as the markets that we have. Even bigger than Miami. We are just spread out, and we're spread out over a big distance as opposed to some of these other places, and that makes it more difficult. And we don't have transportation to get our people shifted from one part of town to the other, so we rely on driving, and that can create some major problems when you're trying to put mass amounts of people together at once. Not as big of a parking problem over at Raymond James, but there's a lot of space over there, and like we said, the place really has little character. People go there for the bucks. They don't go there for the atmosphere of what's around Raymond James Stadium. So,
well, some people do. I mean, some people enjoy the strip bars.
Depending on what you're into. Yeah. What is your score on a ranking of 1 to 10 that this stadium will happen? That this will be constructed, and in 2023 that the Rays will throw the first pitch?
Well, one of my heroes of sports radio is Mr. Kornheiser, so I'm going to say 10 or 100% that this stadium will be built in Ybor.
You think that this is a sure thing? This is a slam dunk.
It will get done. There's gonna be some highs and there's gonna be some lows and there's gonna be some stuff yelled and screamed and written in the newspaper, and in the end, it'll get done because there's too much money to be made by people and too many chests that they get to pump and do for this not to happen.
Is this going to go to a vote on a bond issue for the taxpayers to have to pay through for a referendum? Vote in on a referendum to pay for funding this?
That's something for the Hillsborough County government to worry about. If it has to, they will find a way to get it passed, whether it means they have to, I don't know, join this on to some other, maybe they'll do it for schools or something, or police. Years ago, actually when they built the Trop, I think a year or two before they got financing for it, they had a tax hike for schools and teachers in Pinellas County for sales tax. I think.
And then they used it to build a stadium?
No. It was denied. People said, no, we're not going to approve a sales tax increase for that. So the next time they did it, they said, well, let's add the stadium. So half the money will go to the stadium and half the money will go to the other stuff. And lo and behold, it passed.
I just think that the climate for paying for the public paying for professional sports is a lot different now than it was back then, especially considering that I don't think when the Rays moved in, all we had was a football team. So we were a one-sport professional city for the most part, as far as the 4 major sports go. They wanted a baseball team bad. They were willing to do things that they probably wouldn't do now. Now that they already have a baseball team, they see that they really don't feel like they gain a whole lot from it. And I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here. But I think the climate has definitely changed, especially what I see on social media and people complaining about having to pay for these millionaires to build their big stadiums so that they make more millions of money. It's a new day. It's changed a little bit.
And I hate to say it, but those people are short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
And again, look, I'm not saying it's a no-brainer, but at the same time, like if our community benefits from this significantly, I mean, not just $1 or $2, but if there's a significant okay, yeah, somebody else is going to make some money on this too, but if we make money, that's the most important thing. So if our community makes money as a whole or is embittered, that's fine. If somebody else makes money, there's lots of deals out there where, I mean, hell, we trade our car into the car dealer because they're going to give us money. We know that they're going to sell it for more money than they gave us, and they're going to make money on us. So, I mean,
why does the state of Florida and our representatives up in Tallahassee not want to help out with this? Why do they feel that it's outside of their scope to help out Tampa with building a baseball stadium?
Well, I think currently in our legislature, we have a lot of people who don't believe that public money should be used to purchase or help purchase stadiums and stuff like that. Just their own personal belief. And so they've actually tried to pass statutes and different things that say that money can't be used, and they're just trying to dictate what local governments can do. So
what do you think about that?
Nonsense. It's very un-Republican.
I don't know. It's a very Republican legislature.
Even though our Republican is high, is mostly Republican, our legislators doing this is very un-Republican.
What I find is it's very Republican for state government to dictate what lower government does, but they hate when the federal government dictates what they do as a state government.
Well, that's probably every politician.
Because powerful local governments are made up of cities, which are usually governed by the other side. So they're not typically for allowing the other side to have much power. So it looks like we have a guest here. So I'm stuck here by myself. I think maybe this would be a good time to take a break. So we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I think we're going to discuss a little bit about the Supreme Court Justice appointment, or nomination at least, by the president of Brett Kavanaugh, how it came to be, a little bit about Kavanaugh, and what we feel about that nomination and its chances of going through. And hopefully we'll have some of you will comment on that. And when we come back, that will be our point of discussion. Next time we'll lock the door.
Bless my heart, bless my soul. Didn't think I'd make it to 22 years old. There must be someone up above. Say, come on, Brittany, you got to come on now. You got to
All right, thanks to those pesky laws, I can't play a whole lot of that song. I was asking you to hold on, and so was the Alabama Shakes. They were asking you to hold on. We are back. We just had a visit from our office tailor, our seamstress, who handles our all the clothes for the show. She is our official seamstress for Culturally Damaged. Her name is Rita. I'm not sure I even know her last name. What's Rita's last name? Rita the seamstress.
Yes.
She comes in and measures us and hems all of our clothes because we've lost weight. We have to have our shirts and our pants taken in a little bit. I tried to get her to take the pleats out of all my pants, but she said she can't do that. So I'm stuck wearing pleated pants in 2018.
I was going to say, I think she said that those were like 20 years out of date or something.
Well, they are definitely 20 years old. That's when I started buying suits, and that's probably the last ones I bought. So, yeah, got to get some more business, I guess. But that being said, business. We have business to talk about today. For those of you who are interested in the Supreme Court. I know many of you aren't. We did some polls on our
Actually,
on our
most
website.
people. I was surprised. I thought more people were interested in whether Coke and Pepsi was going to be at the Rays Stadium. Than,
did you actually
Supreme
make
Court
that?
thing
Did
here.
you make that an option on there?
No, if I had done it though.
Yeah, it probably would have been more important. But no,
Yeah.
I think we have some educated listeners. I think a lot of our listeners are professionals. A lot
least
of
my
them are at work
friends.
right now. At least your friends are. Mine are mostly knuckleheads. But you know, the Supreme Court obviously is shifting. Just this past week, President Trump, still
Your president, yes.
still pains me to say that. President Trump actually nominated Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court after the resignation of Anthony Kennedy, who is 81 years old and who agreed with the president to resign as long as he would appoint his selection.
Mm-hmm.
That itself is sort of maybe a conversation to have. I'm not sure that that's happened before, but maybe it has. I don't know. A lot of Supreme Court justices die because it is a lifetime appointment, so a lot of them die in office. But we actually have some that retire and want to live some their later years with their families, and that's
Those who don't go
understood.
hunting.
Those who
You know, while
yeah, well,
with people who make mistakes or accidents and all that
with
kind
Dick
of stuff.
Cheney.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so we have an appointment from the president of Brett Kavanaugh. What do you know about Mr. Kavanaugh?
Well, he seems like the kind of judge that I would probably like to see up there.
Why?
From my perspective, he is less likely to interpret statutes in more of a because I don't want to use the term like what do they call it, constitutional constructionism or whatever, because no one is ever going to be no one's ever going to interpret the Constitution like word for word as it was done when the thing was written. But I think he has a more conservative or a less expansive view of the Constitution being a living, breathing document. So I think he would try to make his opinions, at least, or not make his opinions, but his opinions would probably be closer to a more traditional. I don't even want to say traditional because sometimes that's even viewed as bad ways, but just less expansive, not open to interpreting as much from what statutes and trying to stay a little bit more towards what's the written word. So
not necessarily reason and what's going on in today's world as opposed to what was going on 200 years ago.
No, I don't think he's a strict constructionalist as far as, because he has been willing to, and I think every judge is willing to, at least they should. There has to be a level of expansion, just because our Constitution says all men are created equal. Well, obviously that means all men and women are created equal, and so I mean, if you want to,
It's a pretty outdated
document,
let's face it.
well,
The principles aren't.
Things,
The principles aren't
Yeah.
all the way. We've gotten rid of a lot of the bad parts of the Constitution, and we've added a lot to the Constitution over the years. But it's still like the language is pretty outdated.
Mm-hmm.
There was a conversation the other day, and Justice Ginsburg actually stated that if she were to come up with a new constitution, like if a country wanted to draft their own constitution, that she wouldn't give advice to them to depend on the United States Constitution because it's a little outdated. And a lot of people, of course, twisted that and turned it and made it sound like that she doesn't believe in our Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
which is completely not true. But you have constitutions like in South Africa where they enumerate all of your rights. Like they list them. You don't have to guess them based on principles. They actually list your rights, and they're going to add to that, I'm sure. They may take away from it, but and it may not be as hard to do that as it is here. To change the Constitution is a huge movement
Mm-hmm.
here that you have to have. But getting back to Kavanaugh,
which is good compared to like what Florida does. Like,
yeah,
I mean, there's,
it
there's,
is
I mean, I
good.
guess there's
a referendum can change it basically.
Yeah.
in
So
the
I
state of
mean,
Florida.
yeah.
which is hard because if you get 2/3 of people to agree on anything in the United States, that's a tough thing. But there's more than that in the United States Constitution. There's the things that have to be done in Congress, and then it has to be voted on by the people, ratified, and such. So with Kavanaugh, getting back to Kavanaugh, he's a D.C. guy. He was born, raised in D.C., went to school in Maryland, right outside of D.C., went to Yale Law School. Clerk.
George W. Didn't he
He
go
was
to
at-
Yale too?
he did get, most of these guys had to stop at Yale at some point. You know what I'm saying? They're like Harvard, Yale, all the
Yale,
Ivy League schools. Well, I think he was a cheerleader at Yale, actually. He was a cheerleader at Yale. Take that how you please, but I'm not dogging him. I'm just saying he was a cheerleader at Yale. But he was appointed by George W. Bush to the District Court of Appeals, and that was a very confrontational.
Confrontational, but what is it?
Well, it took 3 years to get him in. It took 3 years to get him in because of his partisanship, and a lot of people had problems with the fact that he was sort of a Republican insider and that he's a party guy. I mean, he's always been a party guy, and there's no shame in that. But as a judge, is that what we want? We talk a lot about that with Dave Ellis. Dave Ellis is a guy who's running for judge, and you're running his campaign. He's very apolitical. He just doesn't get involved, and it works against you a lot because you're trying to get him involved in these things, and he doesn't even know the norms sometimes. And that's not a shot against him. We consider that to be a benefit.
That's what you want.
That's a benefit.
A lot of times,
right? Yeah. So when we talk about Kavanaugh, we're not really getting that. We're getting kind of a foot soldier for the Republicans. Now, you can talk about his ideology and how it fits and how it might be online with yours. But I would say that he's definitely somebody who's been heavily involved on one side. And is he going to break that mold? Is he going to be an Anthony Kennedy on the court being the swing vote? I don't see that happening from what I've seen of him and his past. I don't think that's going to happen. But it could.
Well, and I think, a lot of, I posted an article the other day that it was, it was a libertarian who wrote it. And I probably would fit more of that mold as far as my political views go. But, the gist of it was that they feel that Kavanaugh is, the most important thing with any judge that's coming in is, at least I think, is that judge should have deference for precedent.
Yes, of course.
Regardless of whether they're going to be a more left-leaning judge or a more right-leaning judge, as long as they're giving the due respect to what's happened before, and especially when things have been settled law for so long. And so essentially, and a lot of people are upset about Roe v. Wade for understandable reasons. It's a valuable case that allows women to have prevents the federal government and state governments from putting unnecessary restrictions from a woman getting an abortion. And so it's important. And the discussion is that these judges, and I don't think that Kavanaugh has given us any reason, unlike some of the other potential nominees, that he would overturn Roe v. Wade. Not that he won't, but I don't know that he's given us positive, or reinforcement that he would, where I think some of the other nominees have made statements in the past that make you more concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's something that concerns you, or if it's something that excites you, but I don't think from a left perspective, I don't think he's any more what's the word I'm looking for? He's probably not as scary as some of the other people that I've seen. But the scary part of it from our side is that there is now a shift in the court where there's a conservative majority. Mm-hmm. And that stems from the fact that the Democrats lost a seat under the Obama administration when Antonin Scalia died. And why? I'll never know why. I'll never understand the reasoning. And I'll always be pissed off by the fact that the Republicans and Mitch McConnell stole that appointment from President Obama. President Obama had every right to appoint a new justice, and he did, not appoint, but to nominate a new justice, and he did in Merrick Garland. And Merrick Garland is somebody who both sides liked, who they knew if they had a hearing on his confirmation that they would have to pass him because he was a guy that was middle of the road. He was popular on both sides. He was in his 60s, and he was somebody who was not a major threat to do anything drastic. And by doing that, by nominating a white male in his 60s, the president really met halfway with Mitch McConnell and the leadership of the Senate in order to get him appointed. And the fact that he was not able to appoint a judge when Antonin Scalia died was a travesty that I'll never understand how that's justified. I'll never understand. And now it's making a major change because now the court has shifted over. And that happens. I'm sure a lot of conservatives are very pleased by that. But what precedent did Mitch McConnell set by not holding hearings for a judge? Now, when the Democrats have the majority in the Senate now, and President Trump say this happens. I said, say it happens. It's going to happen in the next 100 years at some point if we make it past the next 3 or 4. But there's going to be a Republican president and there's going to be a Democratic Senate. And now the door's already been opened that they can just completely tell him that he or she cannot have a confirmation hearing on the judge that they pick until after the next president's elected. And that is a door that I think should have never been opened. They should have given the office of the president the deference that he deserved in appointing a president, giving him a fair up and down hearing in the Senate. They didn't do it, and that was a travesty. And I think that I honestly think that something like that should have had people out in the streets, because I don't think people realize how much that's going to affect the future of our country. I mean, Donald Trump, if he doesn't get elected in 2020, I'm not saying he won't, but even if he doesn't, he's already left such a huge mark on this country. And I'm not saying a bad mark. I'm just saying he's already left such a mark on this country because of the 2 appointments that he's made. And I'm not saying that they're bad appointments. They're conservative appointments. But he changed the direction of this country in the 4 years that he will have been here as president if he doesn't get reelected. So much so that it's going to change the future of our country for many decades.
Well, and I will tell you too, that from listening to Friends, and you listen to even
Fox
if you just
and
watch
Friends?
Fox. Well, even if you watch Fox and Friends, but a lot of people voted for President Trump because of this exact reason. Mm-hmm. It's not that they were in love with Trump. A lot of people don't like him at all, but
he's hard to like.
For a lot of Republican voters, making sure that the next Supreme Court judges were quote unquote conservative was their primary focus.
No, you're right.
And
and
because of what you just said, because a president's term in office is 4 years. Maybe there's a legacy after that, maybe there's not. But if that president appoints judges to the Supreme Court like he's done, or in the process of doing now, that's 20 years later. That he can still have an impact on this country. And so I think that's the party can have an influence on this country. And I think, for whatever, right or wrong, Republicans were able to use some of that. I mean, that's not the only reason, but that's a part of the reason why people...
I realize that. In fact, I've heard that argument many times when I had with fellow conservatives say, hey, this guy's not a conservative. This guy's not a Republican. And a lot of them said, listen, if Hillary gets elected, she's going to appoint liberal young judges that are going to change the face of the court for generations. And if Donald Trump gets elected, we're hoping that he doesn't appoint himself, but that he actually appoints... not one of his sons, but he actually appoints a conservative judge who come in. And that's exactly what he's done. I'm not dogging him for that. That's what he's supposed to do. He did what we expected him to do. But what you just said to me was that the president's job is to appoint justices that align with his party. And
I didn't say that.
Well,
that's what people wanted him to. That's why people voted for him. To align with his
beliefs, or to align with the beliefs of his voters, right? And that's why they voted for him. So why in God's name was Antonin Scalia not able to be replaced by the sitting president at the time of his death? And don't tell me it's because it's an election year, because that has nothing to do with it. There's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about not being able to replace a justice during an election year. And him not getting a vote was a new low. And poor Merrick Garland, who would have been a great judge either way, probably would have been a swing guy, had to wait 8 months in limbo to see if he was going to get approved by the Senate or even get a vote, had to prepare for the hearings, and never even got a question from one senator.
Well, I can't tell you that that's fair, right, or not, but it happened.
Well, I think you can tell me if it's right or not. I mean, I think you could tell me morally if the president
know enough about it, so I couldn't tell you whether I felt it was. I don't know enough of the circumstances. I mean, I know what you're saying,
but you know that it's a president's job to appoint. And you know that there's no rule in the Constitution that says during an election year you cannot appoint your own justices to the Supreme Court, because the people elected him to be President of the United States, and part of that job is to appoint or nominate Supreme Court justices. And that's exactly what he did. And he was taken, that right of his as president was taken away from him, and it's going to change the future of our country. And it opens up a Pandora's box of what's going to happen in the future. And when you set these precedents,
leave Pandora out of this.
It feels great at the time. You got your judge. You ended up getting Gorsuch instead of Merrick Garland. But what's that going to mean in the future? Because one of these days, believe it or not, the Democrats are going to have the majority in Congress. The pendulum's always going to swing back by, and it's always going to nip you in the butt. And when it happens, you know what the Republicans are going to say? How dare they?
That's what they always do.
How dare they?
That's what all parties do. Every time those things happen.
It's guerrilla warfare that always starts on the right, man. It always starts on the right. It always does. And the Democrats come to a gunfight with a baseball bat, and they always lose. And then they have to realize down the road that if they're going to win, they've got to fight dirty. So then they start fighting dirty, and then they both look bad. And it's a shame that's the road that politics has gone down. But it takes one party to be the one to let us slide down the slope, and that's what happened with Garland. And I'll never forgive the Republican Senate for that. I won't. That to me was the lowest of the low that they've ever done.
Well, all I can say, and you're right. I mean, look, I agree that parties have to be careful of what they do, because eventually they won't be in power. And we've talked about this before. This is one of the things that I say about what's going on with the immigrants and stuff like that, and especially when we talk about like people from Puerto Rico and other places where they're already citizens to begin with. Let's start with that. Mm-hmm. That you have a party who is not welcoming, and no matter what, again, from I do believe that we should be open and inclusive of people anyway. But from a pragmatic standpoint, there's, people can complain about how many people are in this country. We can complain about this. The reality is, like you said, within the next 100 years, Democrats are going to be in control of something, right? No matter what. Eventually it's going to happen.
It's going to happen sooner than 100 years.
Well, yeah, I agree. And eventually, I agree. But I'm just saying, you said, sometime it's going to happen.
Maybe the end of the year.
It could happen. It could happen in 2 years. It could happen, but again, the same thing. White people are going to be the minority in the United States of America in a certain number of years. Whether that's, it doesn't mean we're going to be a minority compared to African Americans or compared to Hispanics, but when you
just overall,
mm-hmm. we're going to be a minority.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
And if a party or a group of people wants to not or ignore that or accept like those people don't exist, well, eventually you're going to be that minority party forever. Yeah. Not just a minority party for a year or two or 4 years.
Well, and South Africa managed to hang on for a long time with a white minority. Yes, but we saw what happened there. Eventually, there was a revolution.
And it's not going to be that way. But of course, but the same thing happens though. And the same thing with all the stuff that goes on in politics. And I have friends who say, the Republicans are. I'm like, yeah. Well, 2 years ago it was the Democrats doing the same thing, and this is what happens. Unfortunately, in politics, it's tit for tat. It's eye for an eye. You did this to me 2 years ago, so we're going to do the same thing back. And, sometimes it's good that there's this conflict. And there's always going to be a conflict between the executive and the legislative branches of our government, even the courts. It's especially true when you have, there's a lot of Republicans out there that don't believe that Trump should be doing the tariffs the way that he's doing the tariffs, and that Congress should have control. It's protectionism. Over,
it's the opposite of capitalism.
Well, but I'm just saying though. But
I agree.
But you have people of the same party mm-hmm. who are saying, and it's really more. It's not really a party issue for them. It's really a matter of, hey, I'm in Congress, I want to have control, and the president saying, nah, I'm the president, I want to have control, and so that push and pull goes through even through the branches like that though.
Well, more to your point that you just mentioned is that if you don't reach out, if the Republican Party doesn't reach out to a new tent pretty soon, they're pushing everybody out. They're pushing out gays. They're pushing out everybody but white folks. And they're pushing out Hispanics. They're pushing out blacks. And what you said, that the demographics of this country are changing so that whites are going to be the minority. So if you're the Republican Party, why wouldn't you try to expand your tent to include some of these people of color, to include some of these people of alternative lifestyles compared to what yours is, and quit trying to just hang on in every way you can? You can't literally kick out all the Latinos in this country. You can't win with just a white vote in the future. I mean, you really can't. You really can't.
I don't know why.
You really can't. There's just not enough of them. And if the Democrats mobilize people of color, we're going to see what happened in 2008. We're going to see what happened in 2012. So my advice to the Republican Party would be to
keep doing what they're doing.
Expand your tent, man. Like, let some other people in. George W. Bush tried to do it by creating a path to amnesty. And he got thrown under the bus by congressmen throughout Texas and Arizona and Nebraska and New Mexico, who said that, no, we're not doing that. That's not going to fly in my district, so we're not doing it. And eventually he started to lose his base, and he lost footing and had to get out of it. But he was at least smart enough, and I think through his advisor, Karl Rove, who I don't like but I respect, knew... You
have a poster of him in your bedroom.
I do have his book on my shelf, and I've read it many times. He's a very smart man. But he knew very early on back in the 2000s that if the Republican Party were going to survive in the United States, that they were going to have to bring the Hispanics under their tent. It wasn't going to work with African Americans, that the biggest in that they had was hardworking Hispanics who they could pit against other minorities. And they were Catholics, they had a great work ethic, and they were very susceptible to bringing into the Republican Party. But the fact now of what's happening under Trump has really diminished the possibility of there being a big Latin following for the Republican Party. Even with Cubans who have traditionally followed the Republican Party are starting to dwindle. And that's not good news for the party in the future.
No, it's not good news for anything. So
that's good news for the Democrats.
Well, yeah. Well, but I think though therein lies, even with Democrats, is that there's a lot of people who feel that the party is not progressive enough for that candidates, and I think at some point we can only hope that at some point there'll be viable third-party candidates.
I hope so. We need that.
That's really the only thing that
we really need
that can help it, because I think and what I was reading an article the other day. We're getting a little off, and we're probably pretty close to being done today. But there was an article that was talking about the 2020 primary for Democrats, and they're expecting to have a huge field of Democrats. Yeah, in that field, and if they're not careful, and they're talking, and the changes of the superdelegate rules and some different things have been put in place.
Change.
And, they easily could have a Trump situation where you could have somebody come out of the far left who might only get 30% of the actual vote, but if everybody else is splintered. And so we really could have an extremely polarizing...
That's the direction this country is going, though. You know what I mean? Yeah. And but why should the Democrats have to put a moderate up against somebody who's not a moderate? And so that's the argument from the left is, why do we have to be moderate? Because when the farther that the right goes to their side, the further we get sucked into the middle to seem legitimate. But and we have to kind of compromise by going to the middle. So a lot of people believe that we should start from the far left, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the 2020 primaries. Hopefully, we can kind of whittle that list down just by talking sense into some of the candidates that that they don't have a chance, and some of them are just trying to get their message out there for a future election. They might be trying to sell books, they might be trying to sell steaks, whatever it is they're trying to do. Whatever it is they're trying to sell. That was a Trump jab, but whatever it is they're trying to do, we need to get those people whittled down to like 2 or 3 people by the end, so that we can make a good choice of 2 people,
like
2
the
or 3
Republicans
people.
did, huh?
Oh, they did. Well, they did, but their choices were what? Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. I mean,
no. Well, Kasich was in there as well, and so a lot of Democrats who said I would have been happy to vote for Kasich even over Hillary.
I'm one of them,
and that's the problem, and that's and the other problem is that not most people, but a much higher percentage of voters in the primary are very active, and they're probably more fringe voters.
Yeah, it's a base
than the independent, and so you end up most of the people who vote in those primaries, or a larger percentage of them, want extreme candidates.
Well, that's why, in the Republican primaries, it was who can say the most crazy conservative stuff. And then when they get to the general election, they have to change their focus back to appealing to the moderate voter, right? The swing voter. So, the big thing that happened with John McCain, that was his problem, was he started out in the middle, right? He appealed to moderates at the very beginning, but then he had to go away from that and roam off to the far right and get the far right and say the crazy things that they say in these Republican primary debates, and then make his way all the way back to the middle. And it was too much shifting to do in that amount of time, as opposed to when someone starts out on the far right and then they move slowly to the middle towards the general election. They're a lot more able to
Well,
to pull that off.
opinion of McCain is that not that he started off. It's just that the far right left him out to dry. A lot of people on the far right just said, "I'm not going to support. I'm not going to do anything."
Because he started as a moderate. He never went.
Yeah.
He was never able to get from the moderate to the right and then back to the center. And so that's why you don't want to start in the center. Mitt Romney started in the center, and then he went over to the right to try to get them. They gave him the nod, barely, but he wasn't able to. He wasn't able to do what he said, which was the Etch-a-Sketch? I just shake it up and restart it again. So what he was saying was, I can completely change my message now that I'm talking to the middle, and that kind of waffling, showed some instability with him.
See, I don't know that he ever had the support. He never
Well,
had
he won
the support
he won the
of the
primary,
right.
but he won the primary.
True,
So,
but the right didn't vote. Still didn't. And that's the
he
thing.
didn't mobilize them in the election. And
those were also a little bit different. I don't think things were quite as polarizing as they've gotten.
This was only 5-6 years ago, man. This wasn't that long ago.
It was over 8 years ago. 10
Not
years
when
ago.
Mitt Romney ran. It was 2012. It was 5 years ago.
Oh, that's right. He ran against the site. That's right. The second term of
6 years ago. 6 years ago. Yeah.
But it's still a different political climate out there.
It is. It's getting worse, but at the same time, it's going to be the same problem. Is who's going to start where? If we get somebody that we already know to have on the left side to have a very liberal voting record, or a very liberal record on whatever it is, like the future governor of California is Gavin. What's his last name? Somebody type it in here. Gavin something, but he's a very far left California Democrat. And if he starts from the far left and moves his way into the middle, he could probably, I don't even know, I can't even think of his last name right now. But when most people see him for the first time, they might not be seeing him as a very far left liberal. They might see him moving in. And when the mainstream starts to see him and the left is pushing him towards the center, that might be the first that they ever see him. And then he might be easier to swallow, is all I'm saying. I don't think we have any time. We've gone over.
Yeah, we've gone over.
We've talked about a lot of fun stuff today. Let's retrace all the stuff we've talked about. Just kidding. We don't need
No. But what do you got going on? Anything coming up this weekend?
No, man. It's a pretty dead weekend. I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to probably lay some pavers out in the yard this weekend. Got new grass now. I got to keep it watered. What about you?
I was going to check my calendar here. I don't know what's going on anymore. We're doing a barbecue down in St. Pete.
Well, maybe I'll join you for the barbecue.
No, you're not invited to that one. Sorry. No, we got a barbecue down in St. Pete. I might try to. I'm going to see what my brother's doing on Sunday. I haven't gotten to see him and the kids and his wife Carrie in a while, so that would be nice. But we also might go to Safety Harbor the Friday night event. So I might go down there.
Oh, is it the second Friday or something?
Well, it would have to be second Friday because it's July 13th.
Yeah, I think they do that. I've been there before. It's really crowded. It's a fun event. It goes on for like a
we're going to
mile.
have fun with that. And then, like next week, man, like judicial forums, they are boom, 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 boom. I think we got 5 or 6 of them in a 5-day period. So,
well, Evan, you better be there if you're listening.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't miss any of those forums. So we'll see Evan on, in 2 weeks from today?
The 2nd.
On the 2nd, we'll see Evan on the show to talk a little bit about his campaign if he still wants to come in, and any other candidates who want to be on the show. You're welcome to come in and pitch either side you're on. It doesn't really matter. We just like to hear what you have to say and inform our listeners before they go to the voting booth on August 28th as to who to vote for.
And we'd also
based on more than just what you see in their name.
That's
you
right.
Like their letters.
That's right. And also, since we tried out our new little system here, I'd like to hear what people think about the new video and if audio is working okay and everything. I think we can already tell, I think, from watching a little bit of this that the video is doing a lot better than it did previously. So.
Dan Falk's letting us know that Safety Harbor thing is on third Friday, not second.
Third Friday. Uh-oh. Who was that?
That's Dan Falk.
Dan.
Of Big Trophy Trivia.
Dan.
And employee at the Dunedin Library.
Well,
thanks, Dan.
How do I have my date? How maybe I don't. Maybe it's not on the 13th. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe you need to thank Dan Falk.
Maybe I need to go. Maybe if I show up this week, I'll just be walking out there by myself.
Yeah, take pictures of that. I'd love to watch that on next week's show.
Hopefully, no. I don't think I'll be wearing the tutu this time with the sign. So
you pretty much wear it every time you're not on the show.
Safety Harbor is a little different crowd than St. Pete, so.
Nah, no, it's not. Wear your tutu. Hey, if you need some legal help, let us know. Dan does elder law, trust and estate law. I do criminal, personal injury, and family. So give us a call. You know how to reach us on Facebook. Dan Falk is the best trivia host in the land right now. But
I think he might be your only one right now.
No, we've got a few, and I'm going to give him a run for his money tonight. I'll be at Caledonia hosting music trivia, Caledonia Brewing in Dunedin, Florida, at 8 p.m. tonight. Come out. We got prizes for the top 3 finishers, and it's going to be a blast.